Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my podcast. Today, I want to introduce to you Angela Peters. And the way we're going to do this is by introducing her through her husband, Yorick. Hey, Yorick. How are you?
Hi, Kirti. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Lovely to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, great to be here.
I was so grateful. You contacted me on LinkedIn when I sent out the nominations, and you nominated your wife, Angela. I would love to know through your lens why your wife.
Yeah. Well, thank you for indeed the opportunity. And when I saw your post, looking for nominations, I immediately thought of Lita, Angela. Angelita, as she is called after her grandmother, was called Angela. So she's little Angela, Lita. So that's just to because you will hear me referring to her as Lita, not so much Angela. But Lita, so I immediately thought about her. There was no doubt in my mind for a couple of reasons. She is an example for me, for our family. She is much stronger than she thinks she is. I think she can do even more than she's already doing.
And what is the one thing that you see in her that she doesn't see in herself that we could surprise her with? Because she has no idea I've invited you to speak.
Well, this is something that she would not do by herself. She has she's more of an introvert, even though she has tried stand in front of court to as a lawyer to bring cases, to speak to judges and defend the position of her clients. So this is not a natural thing for her to do. But the things I know that she will do great. I know that pushing, let's say, this maybe to her limits will even make her even better. It will be a great experience. And I know that other women can learn from her approach, right? So she has her insecurities, as we all do. I see these insecurities firsthand. I try to give her confidence to go forward and share some of these experiences to other women and to other professionals with an ethnic background to do well and to have maybe a bit more confidence and to take that step and to inspire others.
I think that's a wonderful, beautiful contribution to her. Shall we go over, and we're going to be listening to her podcast now. Thank you, Yorick. Yes. And I hope this surprised her. Is there any last messages you want to share with her before she gets on podcast?
Oh, be you. You do you. Yeah, and you be great. You are great.
It's been an absolute joy meeting you.
Thank you.
That's how I actually want to start it up, because when, as you know, your husband nominated you, Yorick, and from that form I had sent out. And I was so amazed at how it was your husband who nominated you. And it was like, oh, I got to hear this story. And meeting you, you came on and you were like, why me? You didn't know why you. And that is why I enjoyed, because it's been a process, enjoying meeting you as well. So introduce yourself. What would you consider yourself?
How would I introduce myself? Well, it's interesting that you say that my husband nominated me, because I would probably not have thought that I'd ever be on a podcast. That's not who I am. But who I am is I'm Lita. I feel or identify as a Caribbean woman who has, to use a word that I'll borrow from you, evolved into more than what I thought I ever would be. So I'm a Caribbean woman, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a friend, and I'm a learner. I'd say those are some of the things that I think, if I describe myself, that's who I think I am. And so I don't like doing like the formal bio, but I'm also a lawyer and I work now in human resources. But that's just work. That's not necessarily who I am. I do love some of the aspects though of the career that I've built, mostly because it has allowed me to evolve and learn. And that's been a great journey as well.
So, any idea? Did you ever ask Yorick why he nominated you? I'm so curious what he shared with you.
I seem to, like when you say that, I seem to remember a discussion that he and my daughter were having about it. And so my daughter was like, "Shall we tell mom? Shall we tell mom?" I'm like, "Tell me what?" And then he started telling me about nominating me for this. And my daughter and Yorick were, smiling. And I was terrified. And so, again, I think that just fear, that anxiety, and that flight. I almost forget like what he may have told me at the time for the reasons, but I think knowing Yorick has always been the person who believes even more than I believe in myself, in me, and he sees something that, and he helps me see it as well, but that I initially don't see. And he helps me to be something that I sometimes think I can't be. He helps me to be brave. He helps me to be adventurous, which are not automatically things that come to me. And so, why he nominated me, I still like he sees more in myself than I do. I don't know. And that's a long kind of answer, but it's not a real, it may not be the answer that you're looking for, but it's the answer that comes to mind.
I'm actually not looking for any answer. I think it's really nice that sometimes we want the big story, I feel. Everybody has to have that big story. But I often feel it's the heartfelt stories that you don't expect. The ones that it doesn't have to be grandiose outwardly, but inwardly it's grandiose. And I feel that that's exactly how you explained it. You're sharing about your family, your matrix of your family. And it does ask me to myself, I'm wondering what has led you? You call yourself a Caribbean woman. So have I. And a lot of people have called me out and said, you don't call yourself a Curacao. And I'm like, oh, this is a very big conversation because Curacao means island of Curacao. So I was interested, Caribbean, where you're not just from one island, you have a very interesting background as well.
And I think part of that is, as you say, family, right? Like I identify not just as an individual, but as part of a kind of a network that consists of, for a big part, my family as well. And so my dad was born in Venezuela, in Maracaibo. His mom was Venezuelan. His dad was Yudi Corsao. My mom was born in Aruba, but she has ancestry that goes back to, Palestine, every part of the world. But they were raised, both of my parents, in the Caribbean by this, beautiful combination of cultures and languages. And they kind of, I think, transfer that into me. So even though I lived the majority of my life in Curacao, I was born in the Netherlands, actually. But I moved with my parents. Yeah, I moved with my parents when I was 1.5 or 2 years old in Curacao. So all my memories of my childhood and growing up have been of Curacao. And then, as part of my work, also, I had to travel in the Caribbean, and I met wonderful Caribbean people that I really identified and felt became my family as well. And so, because of that, yes, definitely, like my roots and my as they say in Papiamento, lombrici is buried in Curacao, but I feel I have connections. Right? Lombrici is your umbilical cord.
Umbilical cord, okay.
And so that's a tradition in Curacao. When babies are born, when the umbilical cord falls off, they bury it in the ground in the soil in Curacao. And they say that's where my umbilical cord is buried. So that's kind of where I'm from. And my umbilical cord is not buried there, but it feels that way.
It feels more like an expansion in many ways. And how has that shaped your way of perceiving life? Because I know we can see life in different ways, but in general, if you take the bigger perspective?
So I think coming from somewhere where you are small, but part of a larger family, like that sense of community and the importance of having that support system. Again, I think that's been something that I've taken with me wherever I go in life. Because when I moved, when I was 18, I moved to the Netherlands where I was born. But again, I didn't really have a connection or a community there. But when I moved to the Netherlands when I was 18 to study, like I took that with me. And for me, building again that community, that sense of having people that are there for you, people that help you grow and learn, people that are there through the good and the bad times, like that sense of community and needing that in order to thrive. I've taken that with me wherever I went. And I think it's helped me be a little bit more, together with my husband, it's helped me be a little bit courageous and try to move outside my comfort zone and find again my community everywhere where I go.
It's interesting you're saying comfort zone. If you are of many strands of culture, what do you define as comfort zone for you? Because it could be mean many things for many people, right?
Yeah, I think, again, because it is so familiar to me, the Caribbean or Curacao culture, people are warm, people are expressive, people are, sometimes you feel like it's almost too much. They want to know and they know everything about you, but it also gives you a sense of, again, people care about you and you're not alone. And so I think that's kind of what what I take with me and what I remember about, and I'm so sorry. I lost the question there. Your question was
you answered the question very much, which was, it's going back to that question of, now even I'm losing my own mind.
Right? But that's great. Like I think that's what life is all about, right? You can try and plan as much as you want. And I'm a super control freak. Ask my
Are
family
you?
any day. I am. But you plan things and then you realize that life takes you elsewhere. And it's that elsewhere that sometimes makes life so interesting. Because the things you plan are things that you think out, that things that you can't imagine. But the things that you don't plan are actually the things that you can't imagine. And that's the area, I think we were talking about comfort zone.
Comfort zone. There
Around where you move outside of your comfort zone. It seems scary, but sometimes you find like thrilling and interesting things in there. And so,
is that what Yorick shared with you, or is that what you took for your whole life?
I think it may have been like a part of me was always curious, creative. I think I've suppressed it a little bit because, again, I'm mostly a control freak. And so I'd like to plan things. And then you meet people who bring out some of that curiosity back because they're very curious and they inspire you to, why not ask that question? Why not try that thing? And so, I think Yorick brings it out in me, but I think each of us has a little bit of that explorer, adventurer. But depending on what, like your, like for me, my main thing is wanting to control stuff. So you express that. But I think each of us has it. And sometimes it takes either a community, a network, a friend, a spouse, a parent to bring it out.
So I have this thing, I'm smiling because I want to poke at the controlling part of you.
Yeah, well, go ahead. Very familiar territory for me. So you're bringing me in my comfort zone.
Trying to get you out and into it. The controlling part, I always think about lawyers. So whenever I watch these Netflix shows and I see lawyers, you get this perception, right? And always about the facts and getting it, presenting and this logical thinking. I like to think of it comes from the Dutch roots because Dutch background has this, there. So when you have to get into that moment of, you're in that moment of controlling, you want to have that perspective. And as a woman, I find that can be easy because we always like also a bit of control. And then there's that breaking of it. Have you ever found yourself in conflict between the two?
Yeah. trying to think. Like, I think when I think of where has it become a conflict, I actually think about being a mom. That's where it's become a conflict for me. And I'll share why. Like in my work, to your point, being a lawyer, being very analytical, organizing the facts, coming up with arguments, these are things that you can pretty much control. You can put pen to paper and you can prepare for some of those challenges in your work. So in my work, I think being a control freak has helped me. And I said mother, but before being a mother, I was also a colleague or a mentor for other persons. And I realized that's where sometimes it's conflicting because, like, the first time I became a people manager, so I had a team.
Yeah.
I my initial like urge was to try and control everything, including the work or whatever that they did. I thought that was what was expected of me, that I help them do what they need to do. And then I realized, no, like controlling them is gonna it's gonna restrict them. It's gonna not allow them to be who they are. And sometimes they have certain talents or views or perspectives that I didn't imagine, right? So, and I can't control that. And I'm like, wait a minute. And so I saw, and I that's one of the things that I'm super proud of, is that I became more comfortable with letting go and letting persons be who they are, because I realized I could learn a lot, but also they would learn more if I would give them that space. And so similarly, when I became a mom, again, I'm really a control freak, but especially in, I guess, when my kids were starting to have their own views and opinions, there was a little bit of a conflict there. My first kid became a teenager, and but then there was this moment of realization where, just like I had that epiphany with my team members, I'm like, but wait a minute, I want them to become their own person. And they do have interesting views. And sometimes they're right and I'm wrong. And so, again, I think that is where you could say it was a conflict when you're trying to control other people. That can give some conflict. But I think that conflict sometimes leads to, depending on how you use that energy, into your own growth. And I think that's again, so I can see the conflict, like sometimes wanting to control others. Those are situations where I found myself conflicted a little bit with being too much of a control freak. But I think it's also helped me learn that there are, there are boundaries. Sometimes I need to let go. I don't know that I'm very successful at applying that to myself. I am a control freak. I like if I open my fridge and things are not in a certain way, I'll start rearranging them.
So is it controlling or organized?
It's a combination of both, but I think it's, again, that idea that I can decide where stuff is. And so I see it as control.
As long as you made the decision, you mean?
Yeah, I make the decision, and I feel safe when things are organized in a certain way, and I decide where the ketchup goes in the fridge. I'm sorry, that's so mundane, but it's just an example, right? And I get kind of a little bit freaked out when I don't have that structure, but I'm aware of it, so I try to come on, take a breath. It's not that important. Don't sweat the small stuff, but just to let you know that, again, the conflict sometimes is a little bit within myself, letting go, because the conflict outside has actually allowed me to grow and learn from other people. But I still feel I am a control freak, and I don't necessarily think that's ever gonna change. But I think I'm a little bit more aware of it, and I also try to, be open to adapting in certain situations.
But to me, it sounds like there is a huge benefit to having somewhat control, and there's a huge benefit in knowing when to let it go. That's what I'm getting from the conversation.
Yeah,
because I can imagine for you, there's still a certain behind the control. There's still some responsibility. The nature of responsibilities behind there. Thinking back about in your career when you said you had to mentor someone, and then in a way, as a mom or as a parent, you're also mentoring your children, aren't you? At
That is
teenage
correct.
age, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if control. It's an interesting word that we use very often. Controlling, is that a bad thing necessarily, or having some form of structure?
Yeah.
Because you started off as a mom. You said, "I'm a career woman. I'm a mom. I'm a friend. I'm a wife." That's a lot of buckets, right? As individually. If they were all chaotic, how would your life be?
That's true. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think, again, for me, also having that structure, it helps me get through like tough situations as well, because there are certain things within chaos that I can still like control and feel comfortable. And it has, again, it's sometimes the illusion of control, but I think we need it also, or that it's helpful in getting us through certain tough times.
have you ever faced tough times?
I think we all have. But one of the things about tough times and getting through them is that, like in hindsight, sometimes you forget how tough it was. So I think when you ask me, have you been through tough times? I'm like, well, it's all relative. Like a lot of people go through tough times. But I think, yeah, there's been a couple of times throughout my life that I do remember were challenging. But in looking back, I see them as, again, there were challenges that I overcame or that people helped me overcome, and they've led to who I am now. But yes, I, like others, I think I've had challenges.
What is the greatest part of going through challenges? I know there's one struggle I hear often from clients is the word "I'm busy." They make their lives really, really busy. And then underneath there is almost like this, they feel like it's really tough. They're in a tough grind. And how do you learn from those moments is what I'm asking. What have you used, or what helps you go through them?
Yeah. And so again, the busy part, I use that word a lot too. Like, oh, it's been so busy this week. And then when I reflect on it, I still try to tell myself it's a choice. Like, yes, it's busy, but it's as busy as you'll make yourself feel it is, or allow yourself to be. And so I think there again, like having some sort of control, saying I have a choice in whether this week is really busy or not. I could experience it as busy. I could rearrange it so it feels less busy. I could prioritize better. Um, so again, I guess, the question is about, in those situations, in those challenges, how do you kind of deal with that? Sometimes I take a step back and I have to remind myself, these are choices that you've made. Like if it's busy because of work or because of family, I'm like, yeah, but those are things that are important to me. So it's the busyness or the a busy life that I've created for myself. And actually, like, I don't like to, I think I'm fortunate. I think it's kind of, sometimes it's a luxury to be busy, right? So I guess the way I deal with it is when it gets really hard, when I'm really tired, try to step back and say, well, it's actually busy because I have all those buckets. I'm fortunate that I have all those buckets. I have the mom bucket, have the wife bucket, have the work bucket. And so just stepping back, and allowing yourself to reflect and be grateful, like gratitude, that helps me get through tough times.
And that's a nice way of seeing it as well. I think of appreciation for me. Every time I appreciate the moment, it helps me one step further.
Mm-hmm.
And moving, it's a bit of a segue of busy, but you got me thinking, because when I spoke to your partner initially, when I spoke to Yorick, he goes, "Cutie, she's very shy." She doesn't like to be in the forefront. And it made me think that how there's always outside noise of saying every woman should be speaking. We should all stand forward. We all need to speak up. And then even when I spoke to you, you go, "Well, I'm not sure why." You have a much different approach in your growth, even in career. You redefine your sense of busyness and you have your thresholds. Can you share some of that with me?
Yeah. And I think also building in that comment you made about my husband say I'm shy, like I'm an introvert. And every time I tell someone that, they're like, nah, you're not an introvert. I'm like, yeah, I am an introvert. And so um, part of that is that it then like it takes a whole lot of energy for me to um, socialize. And so throughout
Wow.
my career,
Yeah.
I've felt that again, I it's not I'm not naturally inclined to be very social, to self promote, to express my opinions. I'm I'm more the type of person that would sit in a room and be in awe of all the other voices that I'm hearing and try to learn from it. But one on one, I think I feel a little bit more comfortable, and I'm better at, I guess, than expressing my views, feeling comfortable opening up. And so I've kind of tried to find that balance in my career by, I think, oftentimes building relationships. So I start small and then I build that community where at some point I feel comfortable enough to, when I'm in a room with people that I've built those relationships with, even if there are two or three of them, I feel a little bit more comfortable being myself, opening up, expressing views, asking questions. So I think in my career, that introversion has helped me to, I guess, learn a lot because I listen a lot. I think it can be an advantage to be an introvert. You listen a lot. You I'm inclined to build one-on-one deeper relationships,
Yeah.
and that ultimately helps me to build that community around me that allows me to thrive, like in a career setting or work setting as well. It just takes a little bit more time and energy, but I get there.
How did that make you get to Canada?
Right. So that's also an interesting thing. I think in my career, I think it's that openness for opportunity that has gotten me to where I am today more than necessarily ambition. Like, I don't consider myself to be super ambitious. Other people might disagree, but I've always wanted to learn. And I've always been excited when I'm offered opportunities. They're scary, especially the ones that took me really outside of my comfort zone, but they also excite me. And so I think that's where, again, I never planned to be in Canada. I worked for an organization that had their head offices in Canada. And I know my husband, again, making initially jokes, but then starting to open my eyes or push me in the direction, or wouldn't you want to consider that? And so I contemplated it. It was kind of a dream that I wasn't pursuing, and that's what I mean. That I don't pursue things necessarily, but I do keep my eye open for opportunities. And then when they present themselves, I'm like, oh, wow. And one of the things I've also done, and that's brought me where I am today, is like I always tell myself, I rather have tried something and decided, okay, it wasn't necessarily what I thought it would be, then not try it. And then always ask yourself, what if? And that helps me move outside of my comfort zone as well. Like, even if so this move to Canada was like really big, but there was this opportunity. There had been this dream. I know my partner supported me. He was curious to try that adventure as well. And so when the opportunity came, I'm like, I don't want this to be a what if. So let's go for it.
I had two amazing things that have just stood out. One is that this is a really great way to counteract that imposter syndrome everyone keeps talking about, that, pivot your what if moment. And I love what you said, the pursuit of a dream I didn't expect. That is just, I'm like, how do you pursue a dream you didn't expect? Everybody thinks, oh, I have this dream. And you're saying, I didn't expect that I had this dream. What does that mean? That's just interesting.
Yeah. And again, I think that's like the world is full of possibilities, but back to your point about we're in the grind, we're busy, we're heads down, we're trying to manage all those buckets. And sometimes we don't see those possibilities, or maybe we dream them, but we don't really believe that they're real or that we can make them real. And so I think, again, when we step back and reflect and talk about gratitude, I'm so grateful that I have all these great things, and I have a great partner that would actually support me if I decided to pursue that dream, right? So I think it's taking that step back and, even if you didn't dream it or think you were going to pursue it, taking that step back and making sure in life that we pause, and ask ourselves, be curious, like, what could we do? What could we become? Where could we go? What could we discover? And I think, again, having that mindset of being open for opportunities, I don't know if that also attracts those opportunities, or if because you're open, you see them, right? I don't know.
I find it very interesting you're saying that, because, I'm not sure if you heard about this, but when you're living on an island, people only think you won't grow further than the island. And so when you dream on an island, you don't think you're going to be the one who'll move out and do and explore these other avenues and opportunities. I'm not sure if it's the same way as before, but listening to you, it seems like you just broke that myth.
And you know what the thing is about that myth? Like, I think a lot of us feel that we are living the dream. Like, when you're living on such a beautiful island with such a tight-knit community, right? Like, you're living in this bubble. So I think a lot of us don't feel the need to escape from it. Yeah. But are we limiting ourselves? Because there is a bigger, world going on out there. There are other people waiting to learn from us or help us reach our full potential. And so, I never felt like I had to escape the island. As I mentioned, I like being in my comfort zone. But when you start thinking about and seeing the opportunities, I think it's really hard to then say, nah, again, because it's going to be a what if. What if I had done it? And so, the myth about, I think if you're curious, if you want to, if you have the opportunities, if you have the support, if, then I think you can then, there's no limits, right?
And so now that you're in Canada, what has been the biggest, because obviously I know the lifestyle is very different, Canada and Curacao.
Yeah.
So what have been the big adjustments, even for you, and getting your family through the adjustment level as well?
So let's start, with the family. I think one of the reasons we moved was not just because of the opportunities for me from a career perspective, but we were also really curious. Our kids were reaching the age where, as I just mentioned, they started having views and opinions. And we were thinking, how cool would it be if we could expose them to something different, something big. And so the adjustment, I think a lot of the focus in our first year was on making sure that they adjusted well. But it was a big step for them. Like, they leave their friends behind, they leave their culture, their language, their school, their home. Like, they were born, their lombrici is definitely buried in Curacao, and they don't know anything else than that. I studied in the Netherlands. I did a little bit of traveling. So for us, the focus was a lot on seeing how they adjusted. And that's, again, where I say, as a mom, it's so cool to try not to control everything. Of course, you want to be there for them if they need you. But seeing how they adjusted, how they went through their, again, challenges, and then rose up from that, the resilience. I'm so in awe of that in kids. They don't have all the skills, experience, or, education that we have. But it's almost how naturally they evolve, they adapt, and they become the persons who they're meant to be. Watching that journey. And again, it was accelerated because we made them go through such a big change. But watching that journey has been really inspiring. And again, the adjustment, I think we were focused a lot on that. To tell you the truth, I think we are still adjusting as well. From the mundane things like the weather to again that sense of community, right? Like my husband's super social. I'm the introvert. But going from having that network, that community, your friends, your routines, and coming to a different country where you don't have that, I think that's been quite an adjustment. What it's allowed us to do, though, is like really focus, come back together to the center, to our family.
Oh,
And
wow, really?
yeah, absolutely. Like we spend so much more time with each other now, and we learn more about each other than we did in Curacao.
That's so interesting because a lot of people actually go to the islands thinking they're more in touch with their family.
You're in touch with your family, and I think especially your broader community, but then you have to divide your attention over this entire
True.
network that you have, your time and attention.
Yeah.
And so again, you spend less time really talking to each other, seeing each other change and evolve. And now, like again, because of winter as well, we spend a lot of time inside. And then it's the four of us because we don't have many friends. We don't go out. We don't go out to a happy hour each week and so we got to really up close see our kids and ourselves adjust to this new situation. So I think that is one of the things that, again, I miss my friends and my family, my community in Curacao. But on the other hand, it's allowed me this opportunity before my kids grow up and leave the house, or before Yorick and I are maybe too old to even recognize how we're still evolving, like to be really close. And I think I'm grateful for that.
But talking about evolving, so as your kids are evolving quite exponentially at the sounds of it in their teens, have you ever stood back and watched and asked yourself how you've evolved dynamically in this whole process?
Yeah, I think it's allowed me to exercise that muscle, that and when I call it a muscle, I think again it's that resilience, right? It's when you face unexpected challenges, how do you deal with them? How do you make sure that you come out at the other side of it with additional experience, with additional learnings, with additional wisdom? And so I think in Curacao, like my life was pretty, again, organized and comfortable, very comfortable. And then coming here, again, learning to flex that muscle. Okay, so this is a challenge. Wow, I haven't felt this way before. How are we going to tackle this? And then always, again, trying to tell yourself, okay, we're going to get through this. And so I hadn't been in that situation for a long time when I was in Curacao. As I mentioned, I went through some challenges in life, but I'd say for the past decade, things were pretty sweet and smooth. And again, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So that resilience muscle, I think we learned to flex it a little bit during the pandemic because the world was just like, ooh, so unexpected and so many things changed. And how do we bounce back from that?
You were in Curacao then, right?
I was in Curacao, so I was starting to use that muscle a little bit. Yeah. But then when we made the move here, like I was like, okay, now we're really going to have to go and do this workout every day because every day is a new challenge. And I think I would say evolving it's been a lot around how do you adapt? How do you overcome challenges? How to become resilient? How do you keep looking for that silver lining? Because that's definitely something that I've always been able to do in my life. But over the past year, like sometimes I'm like, okay, look at the big picture. Gratitude. There's opportunity. You'll get through this. And again, I think so that's how I've seen myself evolve over the past year. I don't know if that answers the question.
It does. It also makes me ask, Lita, I'm not sure if it's a fair question to ask, but when we say the word evolve, I'm always very careful because everybody loves to always keep saying we need to keep learning and we need to keep learning. And I also feel I'm an introvert to some degree. I think to me, it's like a bit of a degree where I think I don't want to keep learning. It's a little bit too much, getting so much information. and I need to process. So when we say, okay, I'm evolving, I'm stepping out of my comfort zone, is there a threshold when it comes, does it grind with, does principles that we have with ourselves, they're evolve? Is there a place where you say, yeah, enough?
And sorry, I usually, when I get a question, like my mind starts racing every direction. So I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but one of the things I'm thinking is even when I use the word evolve, I'm talking more about developing certain skills and coping mechanisms. I don't feel that I'm really evolving, like changing who I really am. And so that to me is where I draw the line, or where I say enough's enough. Like I'm not looking to change who I am.
Yeah.
I'm looking to be aware of who I am and then developing certain skills that will be helpful, and so that's the evolution, is more around the skills and how you respond to situations than who you are at the core. So sorry, I just wanted to make that note.
No, it's a very interesting, it's a very valuable note. And I was going to ask you if you had maybe an example to put in perspective, because I somewhat get it, but it'd be really nice to get it, because I do understand there is a big difference.
Yeah.
But it'd be really nice for an example.
And so when I talk about, again, being an introvert, like I'm not looking to change that, because I've accepted that that is who I am. Like I'm never going to be an extrovert, and I don't want to, because as I said, like it feels like that's just too much energy. But then, so clear example, how do I then cope with the reality of being an introvert in a world where, like maybe from a leadership perspective, people expect you, right? And so I think that's where I think when I say evolve, it's then about being self-aware and saying, okay, so this is who I am, but how do I need to respond in certain situations, and have that flexibility to adapt to those situations. That's what, for me, the evolution. So the evolution is about learning to apply certain skills, or changing how you interact with people in different situations. I don't know if that's like a very clear example, but like over the past year, as I mentioned, coming into Canada, sitting at meetings, being in meetings, sitting at a table, and then getting the feedback that, why are you not speaking up? And I was like, okay, I know why I'm not speaking up, because I'm an introvert, but I, at some point, want to have a voice or be a voice. So how am I gonna, and again, I think I also mentioned this example, you start investing and building in relationships with the new people you meet, and you start building that trust, and it's mutual trust. It's like a trust that, okay, if I'm going to say something in a room, I feel confident that they'll be kind and empathetic, even if what I'm saying is maybe not right. Like I've had the type of relationship where they'll be candid, but they'll also be empathetic. And so
their ears are tuned in.
Yeah, I don't feel that I'm in danger or that I have to flee. And so that's how then, fast forward a year and a half, when I'm in a meeting now, I do feel more comfortable speaking up and expressing my views or disagreeing with someone. But I'm, again, I think that's where, not changing at the core who you are, but finding ways to still being who you are, be successful, or be able to contribute in a world where introverts don't necessarily always thrive.
I can totally understand that. And there's an extra layer I'm thinking of as well, is the layer of, what do you think? Do you think in English? Do you think in Dutch?
Yeah,
because we're translating also, right?
That's correct.
So how does that's like an added layer, I would think. Or am I wrong?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And as I just mentioned, like the kids left their culture, their language. So did we. Like my husband and I, we've always, and we still think in Dutch. and you're immediately translating that. And sometimes it holds you back a little bit because again, that layer or that extra couple of seconds that it takes to express your views, as well as the insecurity that maybe I'm not expressing this correctly. It makes you hold back a little bit more. So I'm already an introvert. If I can express myself in my own language, I'm an introvert. And I won't necessarily always be the first one to speak up. But imagine then adding that layer of, being constantly translating and being a little bit insecure. Like, is this how I should express what I mean? Or is that going to sound weird? And I'll give you a funny expression, example is, I think I said to a colleague the other day, yes, let's hit it off. And then what I meant was, let's kick it off. Like a kick off, not a hit off. But again, I've now built those relationships where I know that they'll just laugh. So I don't mind so much. If I'm using an expression and it turns out to be the wrong one, I know people will understand that that's not what I meant and that we can have a good laugh about it.
I know when I had that happen to me in England, I thought I had more frowns. I was like,
what did I say?
What did I say?
And sometimes people are too polite to really tell you what you just said. And then you have to go back and Google it and go, oh my God.
I said that. But no regrets.
No regrets. I actually woke up this morning and I told my husband, I said, I still have days that I really miss our life in Curacao. And when I close my eyes, I can see everything. I can see the way it was. But it doesn't feel like regret. It just feels like gratitude for something really great that I had at some point in my life. And then when I open my eyes, today is, again, blue skies. It's really cold. It's minus 12 degrees. But it's blue skies.
When you said, changes the mundane things, I'm thinking you're sitting from 27 degrees and you go all the way to minus 12. I'm I'm not sure if that's mundane.
So you can imagine, again, the missing a little bit of the life we had on those days. But then when I look around me, I also, as I said, I'm always looking for that silver lining. I'm looking for, yes, but what did I get out of this experience? And there's so much things that I'm grateful for. Not in the last place, just having people who supported me to get here. And that's, from Yorick, but also other people like mentors or people who believed in me, my parents. And it's just a gratitude that having had that support and having had the opportunities that I am where I am today.
I love the saying always, it takes a village to raise a child. I think it takes a village to support somebody. And that makes always such a difference. And that's the power of what you're speaking about today as well, that behind you, you're very grateful for everyone that has walked your path. So I know we're coming to the end, and I have one question for you.
Ooh.
Your daughter and son, we're right now with you. What would be the one thing you'd love them to know, to take with them on their journeys, whatever their journey is going to be?
Can it be two things?
Oh, you can have 10 things.
I think the two things that I'd like them to know is that they are loved unconditionally. And because of that, they should be who they are. Like, there is not, like, I would hope that my children know that it's so important to be and become the person you are, not the person either your parents or the world or anybody else expects you to be. Yeah. But at the same time, and that would be the second element, I would like them to know that it's really wonderful to be kind. Like, if there's something I would love everyone in the world, but especially my children, to know, is how special you are if you can be kind. Like, just be kind. So it's be yourself, because you'll always be loved, and be kind.
I think that's a beautiful message. And one for Yorick, you can be cheeky if you want.
Oh, keep pushing me. because that's how we leap forward and how we go on adventures. They keep pushing me. Like, if he hadn't pushed me, I wouldn't have been here and we wouldn't be having this conversation.
No,
but I enjoyed it so much talking to you. Like, it feels, again, as I mentioned, I feel really safe, and it's been a wonderful journey. So again, I would want to thank him, but encouraging him to keep pushing me.
I'm glad, but thank you. Oh, you really made my day.
Oh,
and happy International Women's Month. May you always be celebrated.
Thank you very much. And thank you for reminding me of that and reminding all of us through your podcast, through your presence, and just through who you are, of how special we are and how much we can accomplish if we keep believing and we keep looking for the opportunities and the support that we need to thrive.
Thank you. All right.